If you want to turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 14. There's a man, we call him Abraham, but at this stage of his life he was known as Abram. And he did not know God. His dad was an idol worshiper. He was a Gentile. He lived in what would be modern-day Iraq. And for whatever reason, we don't know why the Lord chose him, but God himself manifested himself to Abraham, said, leave everything, leave mom and dad, leave everything, leave your home, everything familiar, and come walk with me to a land you've never seen before. Well, he did that. He took his wife, he took his brother's son, Lot, and they didn't have hardly anything at all, and they went on this journey that is recorded in the Bible, and it's the first journey anybody we can see who walked with God. Enoch walked with God. Abraham or Adam had an experience with God in the beginning, but this is a journey that's documented. And I didn't really know what to even make of Abraham. He was just an old codger to me. But when I started to learn faith, and I wanted to learn faith, and I was asking the Lord to teach me, he took me to Abraham, and he's the father of faith. He's the first guy whose life of faith is documented. So everything in the Bible points back to him, saying if you want to know faith, doesn't matter whether you go to Romans or Galatians, Abraham's the guy. And so if you can imagine going out into the unknown, and he doesn't know the Lord, by the end of his time, not only has his faith incredibly increased, grown to proportions that are hard to even imagine today, but he started with nothing, no faith, and just a promise. And the promise was profound, and that promise carried him through. And that promise that he gave Abraham was like a credit card. It was like what we call an inheritance, where it could be passed to your children and to your children's children. And it's an amazing thing. The promise is in chapter 12. We're going to start in 14, but if you just leap back a couple chapters, there's this moment where God met him and spoke to him. And starting in verse 1, come out of your country, from your family, your father's house, to a land I will show you. I'll make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will bless you. And then he goes on to say, and you will be a blessing. And through your seed, and it's seed singular, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Not seed singular. Jesus told him that was him. That was Jesus. So through his seed, which is Jesus, all the world, everybody, us Gentiles, we're blessed through Abraham's steps of obedience. And so he said, I will bless you. I will be with you. He said, if anyone curses you, I'll deal with it. And a curse is essentially damning you to fruitlessness, damning you to uselessness, you won't amount to anything, that's a curse. Failure, that's a curse. He said, just leave that to me. You won't ever have to deal with that. I'll take care of that. That's an amazing promise. Then he says, anyone who blesses you, I'll bless them. Well, if you have that promise in your heart, if you let that into your heart, it would change your Christian life. Doesn't matter what anyone does, doesn't matter what the boss does, doesn't matter what the government does, doesn't matter what anyone does, you're 9 foot tall and bulletproof all of a sudden. So Abraham had this promise, and he let it into his heart, and it made him pregnant with a hope and an audacity that was really pretty amazing. When I was pastoring my first church, we had a little shoebox of a sanctuary. It wouldn't seat very many people. But that promise, I let it into my heart. And I believed it. I believed here we were on Water Street in a little town called Lowville. It's actually Lowville, but they didn't like Lowville, so they called it Lowville. And named after Mr. Lowe. And I believe that we're going to change the world. I believe that we're going to impact the world. We're going to go all over the world. It was insane to believe that, except that promise filled my heart. And we did. We became a significant church and sent out 80, 100 people a year overseas. And we're still reaping from that time. It's a pretty amazing time. I was an artist, so I took my paintbrushes, my tool, my little art kit, and I painted in big letters on the wall. Here we are in a little, we could fit, the whole sanctuary would fit in this part of it here. And I painted, "I will bless you." And I'm not sure if I painted it or we said it, and you will be a blessing. I mean, we're blessed not to improve our tennis game. We're blessed not to get jets for ourselves or for our own convenience. We're blessed to be a blessing. When that got in our hearts and got in my heart, it changed everything. So Abram, he gets this blessing, and the first thing that happens is the economy goes bad. Very first thing that happened. So he gets in line to go down to Egypt, and just like everybody else, that's where the bread was. He goes down there, and so he has that promise in his heart, but it hasn't really been acted on yet. So the Lord just showed him that he would protect him and provide for him, and that's the story of Egypt. Then he comes right back to where he left off. And so he goes full circle. The next big test, so if you're going to get into faith, stuff will happen. And you'll say, well, if I'm walking with God, why is this stuff happening? Well, faith down here, people spit on our faith, people mock our faith. In heaven, faith is everything. That's the economy of heaven. People will see our faith. Somehow they'll be able to see it. And they'll lean over and they'll say, I would give everything I had if I could have just 1 ounce of that kind of faith. We'll see people with faith, we'll see their video, and we'll say, man, they believed God even though the odds were against them, the circumstances were stacked against them. They believed God. And it's going to be the greatest honor to have faith. So here, I'm telling you, and we have some young people here, I wouldn't allow anything to shorten my faith or to have shortcuts or something where you trust in people rather than trust in the Lord. It's faith, 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 and you have to go deep in that, and you'll never regret it. And we don't walk around with muscle-bound faith, but there's a faith that comes out of a relationship with Him that changes everything. So we see that with Abram. The next thing that happened is this biker gang came to town. These guys had like Viking horns and leather jackets, and there's 5 kings, evil kings, and they're marauders. Now you have to understand, at this time there's no forgiveness. It's pre-forgiveness. It's pre-everything. There's no law, so there's no police. There's no right or wrong. People just did whatever they wanted to do. So if you're the biggest and the baddest, you could see someone else's house, their wife, their garden, and say, I want that, and you could take it. And there was no consequence. There was nothing. No army, no police, no nothing. It's called lawlessness. And what's amazing is we're seeing lawlessness today that I've never seen in my life here in America and all over the world. But lawlessness is going to abound. It's going to get even worse. We're reading stories every day. A 90-year-old woman was just raped last week by a 20-year-old guy. Like, who would do that? That's lawlessness. He doesn't believe there's any consequence for that. And then she died. It killed her. And so there's stuff, people are just stealing children. They see someone going down the street, they steal them. That's called lawlessness. And we're told in the scripture that the love of many will go cold and lawlessness will abound. So what's weird now, it's going to get even stranger. It's going to get to a point where people just have no fear of consequences, no fear of the police, no fear of the army, and they're going to just do whatever they want to do because they're big and they're bad. That's what happened to Abram. So these 5 kings came in, they stole Lot. his family. They stole everything that Abram had. And so he's not a fighter. He's not a warrior. There's nothing that indicates he knows anything about that. But he has 300 servants by this time. He's become a little wealthier. And so he gives them, I don't think they have a sword among them. He gives them scythes and sickles and pitchforks. And they go after these 5 kings and they win. I mean, the only reason he could do that is he felt pregnant with a promise that says, I will be with you. Wherever you go, I will be with you. And I'll deal with those who are against you. And so he went after them. He won the day. It's an amazing moment. And when he's recovering from the war, he's got all these servants. I bet they had never fought like that before. And this guy starts walking up to them, this young guy, and he's dressed in kind of priestly robes, and he's got a loaf of bread in one hand and a cup of wine in the other hand, and he's a king. And he's the king of Salem, which is the Prince of Peace, and his name is Melchizedek. And he has no beginning, no end. No one knows where he came from. He's a mystery figure. And he walks up to Abram, and he says to him, you can see this in verse 19 of chapter 14. He said, Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Blessed be the God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. So it's God who did it. It's God. It wasn't Abraham. So he says, the God who owns everything in heaven and in the earth likes you. I mean, if you got that in your heart, if he's on your side, imagine having someone who's super, a billionaire, that he's your friend. He's in your speed dial. He's in your list of people that you can call for anything. Well, it's like that, but beyond anything you can imagine. He says, this guy owns everything. You need to let that in your heart. Don't come up for air until that is really living inside you. The possessor of heaven and earth is crazy about you. And then the king of Sodom, who's a wicked dude, he comes up and he says, give me the people, all the booty of war, all the prisoners. You give me the people, you can have the stuff. And there's a mountain of stuff. And Abram says, I've lifted my hand to the God who possesses heaven and earth. I've lifted my hand to him, saying, essentially, I will not receive any stuff where someone could say, I made Abram rich. So he said, unless God blesses me, unless it comes out of his blessing, I don't want it. Every businessman, every young person should raise their hand and say, I've raised my hand to the God who owns everything, that I will not prosper by any means other than God's blessing. And you raise your hand, you say, I won't lie, I won't cheat on my taxes, I won't steal, I won't cut corners, I won't figure a way to take advantage of people. Unless God blesses me. I remember doing that as a young pastor, that I won't take people out of other churches. And in fact, in that first year, we turned away more people than we ever received. We just said, this is not the church for you. You need to go back, because they were coming for the wrong reasons. And I wanted my church to grow, but I wanted the blessing of God. I didn't want anyone to say that, yeah, he stole our sheep. And so I raised my hand to the Lord and said, I want your blessing. I believe in your blessing. I believe you will bless this church. But I don't want to grow through my promotional skills. We didn't even put out a sign. We just made it hard for God to bless us. And so I think there's something to this. Abram did it. He said, I've raised my hand. And you can do that when you're pregnant with this promise. And the other thing he did that is just really unusual in verse 19, it's almost hidden in my Bible at least, he says to Melchizedek, I'll give you 10%, a tithe of everything I have. Well, that came out of the gush of his heart. So when grace comes in, when you're so relieved that God backed you, God was with you, it was evident God was with you, your first natural response is to give. If grace comes in, you want to give. If you read in the book of Acts where the Holy Spirit's poured out, they're saved, the first thing you read in chapter 2 is they start giving to each other. And people who had land, sold it to give to. You can do that when you're so aware of God's blessing on your life. Abraham did that. God never came to him and said, I want 10%. I protected you. I provided for you. Give me 10%. God doesn't do that. It came out of the volition of Abram's own heart. And I bet that really pleased the Lord. It came out of his want to rather than have to. So this is the first example we read in the Bible of tithing. And because we're Gentiles and we're children of Abraham, this is how we should tithe. We should be so grateful for the grace of God in our lives that we should want to give. Not just tithe, but live a life of giving. And that's what hit me. I remember so overwhelmed with God's grace. I wasn't raised in the church. I met the Lord at 21 in my apartment. And the first thing I told my wife, let's just give everything away. She said, we can't do that. That's the gush of my heart. I just wanted to give everything away. I talked her into tithing. She did not know anything about tithing. If her parents found out we tithe, they would have had my head. But I told her, I said, I want to give 10%, at least right off the top. And we had nothing. But it was so hard on my wife to do that. She caught it. She saw it. She's a tither. But in those early days, it was a big statement. And it comes out of awareness of his grace. And it's a powerful thing. I read, I think it's Deuteronomy 26. It's a whole chapter. And it says something like this. This is my edition of it. It says, the way you present your tithe to the Lord is you go and you bring your basket filled with stuff. And you lay it down at the feet of the priest. And you say to him, I was a stranger in Egypt and I was a slave. I had nothing. And God rescued me and brought me out and gave me my own farm. And this is the produce of my farm. And I want to give it to God out of gratitude. And it's a beautiful chapter. I encourage each of you, make note of Deuteronomy 26. It's the prayer. And so what should happen is, even though we might give automatically on our app, or we might, just put the check in the offering box and not think twice about it, to stand and even to take our kids and say, we're doing this because we were caught in bondage and the devil owned us. He was the father of our lives. And he used us like a yo-yo. And you rescued me from the hand of him who hated me. And I haven't thanked you enough. And you've blessed me. And I now have a job and I have a family and I have a house. And I just want to say thank you and here's my tithe. That's how tithing should happen. Something's happened to tithing where it's become a bad word. People don't teach about it. There's hardly anything said about it. We're a little embarrassed, partly because people who come to the church think the church is all about money, and that's not true. But in those early days, I told our church, we're going to tithe, whether you do or not, and our church is going to tithe. 10% of everything that you give, we're going to give back in some way. And so we would pay for all of camp meeting out of that tithe. We would do different ways that it was to give it back somehow. But I don't even know if I ever heard of another church who tithed. It was a game changer for us. We never lacked for anything. And we made it hard for God. it was very uncommon in those days to create an offering box. I had a guy build me an offering box. No sign or nothing. I just put it on the wall and said, we're not going to pass a plate to remind you that you need to give. We're not going to pass a plate to force you to give in front of everybody else. And I've seen people dance going to the front and go through the motions of tithing, but not really tithe. I've seen some pretty weird things. I can't tell you the stories because it embarrassed somebody, but boy, make it hard for God to bless you. That's the bottom line. Do make it hard for him. Say, Lord, unless you bless me, it won't happen. So Abraham, he wins the day, and it just goes on, one difficulty after another, but his faith grew. And so somehow that inheritance, that promise, was just as real as an inheritance that a granddad would give to his son and grandson, and it went right through the family. So Isaac gets it, and it doesn't talk about tithing, and it talks about that promise. So the Lord came to Isaac and said, I'm the God of your father, and I was with him, and I'll be with you, and wherever you go, I'll protect you, I'll look after you, I'll provide for you. In fact, there was a famine, an economic crisis. You can imagine the whole economy is agricultural. Everybody farms. And people in the city, they have the worst of it. They can't farm, so they're dependent on buying crops on the farm. But the ground is sterile. It doesn't grow anything. It's just a dust bowl. And economic crisis come. Isaac, he gets in line just like everybody else. Nothing wrong with that. Except God says, come here, come on, get out of line. Come over here. He said, stay in the land, and I'll be with you, and I'll bless you. And so he did. Everybody went down to Egypt for food. He went back to his house. You can picture a dust bowl all around him. He goes out to the barn, and he puts his hand in a grain bin, puts his hand in the seed, and it runs through his fingers, and he's thinking. He said, I could eat this, or I can sow it. And nothing grows. So I'm going to have to trust God that something's going to happen. So he takes it and he puts it in a bag around his chest, and he walks out in that field. And it was a good thing no one was around to see him because it looked so ridiculous. He starts sowing in sandy soil, sterile soil. And the Bible says that everything grew and was blessed, and it prospered, and it produced 100%. Every seed produced 100 more seeds. And it's just a great testimony of that promise that I will be with you went into his heart like an inheritance. And then his son, he had two sons, Esau and Jacob, and it went into their lives just like an inheritance. It actually ran through the family. You see that with Timothy. Paul said, the faith that was in your grandma was in your mother and is now in you. And faith can actually go through a family, can go through a home. We've seen that happen. We've seen the baptism of the Spirit go through whole families. Salvation go through whole families. So Jacob, he's a rascal. Right before he's even born, he'll do anything to get ahead. He's wrestling in the womb. He's grabbing his brother's foot so he could be the firstborn. Right from, it's in him, right as a baby. And his name, my translation of his name is, I will do anything to get ahead. That's what Jacob, supplanter, means. I'll do anything to get ahead. And he would lie, steal, cheat. He told his dad bold-faced lies, pretended to be his brother, and the mom was involved with it, and her penalty was she never got to see him again. He ran away. The last thing he saw was his brother's face, was so angry, and he mouthed the words, I will kill you. That's the last thing he saw. So he fled the house, and he gets out on this bald Judean hill under a starry night, And the Lord shows up in a vision, in a dream. And he sees this ladder going up to heaven, and angels ascending and descending. And God spoke to him, and this is what he said. He said, I'm the God of your grandfather, and I'm the God of your father. And I will be with you wherever you go. And I'll look after you, I'll provide for you, I'll protect you, and I'll bring you back to this land. And Jacob was so affected by that because he's got a stick in his hand. And he's even got a stone for a pillow. I mean, he's got nothing. And he said, I will be with you, I'll protect you, I'll bring you back to this land. And Jacob's response, he said, if that's the way you're going to treat me, because that's grace. He doesn't deserve it. He hasn't done one good thing. And he says, if that's the way you're going to be toward me, you will be my God. Today we would say that's being born again. That's his first encounter with God. He said, you'll be my God, and I'll give you 10%, a tithe, of everything that I get. So he's got nothing. But he believes, right? That's a confession of faith. He believes that he's going to prosper, and he does. For the next 20 years, he prospers so that when he comes back 20 years later, he said, I crossed this brook with nothing but a stick in my hand. And he's got these vast herds and she-asses and donkeys and camels and servants and children and wives. And he divides it because his last thing his brother said, if I see you again, I'll kill you. And God told him to go back and face his brother. And so he's afraid. And so he divides his possessions so he doesn't lose everything in one foul swoop. But that promise showed up in his life just like an inheritance. Now, here's what's really important. Be good for you to read Galatians. Galatians is written to Gentiles just like us. And Galatians, I think it's chapter 3. There's several times in Galatians where he says, we are blessed by our father Abraham through Jesus Christ. And anyone who walks by faith is a child of Abraham. And the inheritance that came through Abraham is ours through Jesus Christ. He's that seed. So what's really amazing, everything we read in chapter 12, 14, 28, all these chapters of these early three guys, all that inheritance is ours if we will walk by faith. If you don't walk by faith, it won't happen. It just won't happen. You're going to have to walk by faith. You're going to have to do things that don't make sense. You're going to have to call things that are not as though they were. You're going to have to believe even though circumstances say just the opposite. You're going to have to say, I believe God. And he loves that so much. He said, everything that happened to Abraham is yours. So I got dropped into Calcutta in the middle of the night on my first mission trip by myself. And it was a wild trip. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. And the greatest thing I've ever done. And the Lord was with me and spoke to me and visited me. And made me realize that of all the people in Calcutta, I'm one of a few people that are walking with God by faith, who know the Lord, who loves the Lord, who's not an idolater. And that made me precious in all the earth. It's a powerful thing to have the Lord come and say, I will be with you. Wherever you go. And where I was going, I was in Calcutta, and where I was going was worse. And my pastor, who had been there, didn't think I was really thinking this thing through. I'd been invited to go, and he knew that. So he visited me, and he said, you need to know that the worst place on earth is India. I said, okay. That's where you're going. You're going to the worst place on earth. I said, okay. He said, the worst place in India is Orissa, and that's where you're going. And I said, okay, all right. He said, the worst place in Orissa, and he named he said, it's the Pulbani district. That's where you're going. It's It's the worst place and the worst place and the worst place. But I was pregnant. I was pregnant with a promise. I just believed that I could do that and God would be with me, and he was. An amazing story. I wrote about it. I brought some books of some of those early mission trips, and it talks about what it was like, what happened on those early trips. But it shows that here I'm a Gentile. I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and all the promises that were upon Abraham are still upon me. I have to believe it. You have to let it down in your heart. You have to act on it. It won't work unless you walk by faith. It's not automatic. It's not because we believe in Jesus. There's lots of people who believe in Jesus who have no blessing that I'm talking about. But the reaction was that both these guys tithed. Doesn't say anything about Isaac. Can't imagine him not doing it if his dad did. But I think that's the basis of how we should tithe, why we should tithe. And the original story of tithing is not a Jewish thing. It's not a have to. It's a get to. It's pure. It's simple. It pleases the Lord. It pleased the Lord so much that years later, when he brings the seed of Abraham out of the children of Israel, out of Egypt, and he takes them into the promised land, he said, I'm going to provide a way of forgiveness that had never existed before through sacrifice. I'm going to provide a tabernacle. They've never had worship before. They never had a religion before. All the time they were in Egypt. They were there 400 and some years. No religion. All they had in Egypt was a common language and ancestry through Abraham, but they were slaves. They would work all day, drop in bed, get up, work all day, drop in bed, and that was their life until they died. There was no retirement, no vacation, no breaks, nothing. It was a horrible existence. I've been to many of the biggest slums in the world, and in the slums that I've seen, there's no hope, and there's no sense of getting out, and there's no sense of, you're not planning on staying there, so there's no streets, there's no street lights, there's no electricity, there's no running water, there's no toilets. It's horrible conditions, and there are people who are trapped in there, and that's what the children of Israel were living in. And then God rescued them because he liked Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He liked their faith, and he said, I'll bring you out. So he takes them out, and he cleans them with his word. He gives them his word, and it transforms them. And he says, now I don't want you to be like the other nations all around you. And everything that he commands them is what they were doing. So he says, don't sleep with animals. They were sleeping with animals. When he says, don't sleep with your own children. Don't have sex with your mother-in-law. That's what was happening to all the nation. And when you go to these places, that's exactly what happens. It's idolatry and sexuality and perversion and filthiness all go hand in glove. If you worship the devil, the streets will be dirty, there'll be human waste everywhere you walk. So the Lord says, don't just go to the bathroom anywhere you want to go, or I will not walk among you. I will come and walk among you, but if you do that, I'm not coming. And so everything he said was because that's what the nations around them were doing. And he said, now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a religion that had never existed before, and I want one of the tribes to not have to work in the field or on farms. Their whole job is to serve me as priests for you. And the way we're going to fund this whole thing, rather than 2 or 3 wealthy guys footing the bill for it, I want you all to give 10% from the poorest to the wealthiest, 10% across the board, everybody. And that's going to fund this new religion that I'm going to create. So these guys don't have to work. They'll be available for ministry. And the priests will be available. And the Levites, they will tithe to the priest, and that's how he will live. It's a profound thing. Nothing like this had ever been done before. And he said it for a couple of reasons. It's the way he wanted to fund it. It was God's idea. I think he loved what happened through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob so much that he said, I want this for the whole nation. Except now it's coming as a commandment, because if he doesn't command them with consequences, they probably won't do it. So he says, I want you to bring a tithe of everything. And several times a year, you're to come stand before me, and don't come empty-handed. I want you to come with the tithe. And if it's too much to carry, to bring, then turn it into cash and come bring the cash. And he says, I want the first fruits of everything that comes out, everything that comes to you. And so they took it serious. Like, for example, if you can imagine, guy's got a bunch of sheep. And if you've been around sheep farms at all, they all birth at the same time. They all mate at the same time. They all birth at the same time. And so we call it lambing season. Our churches are in lambing season right now. We're having babies like you wouldn't believe. Just one baby dedication after baby dedication, all kinds of babies. So it's lambing season. It's a good thing. And so the word was, I want the first fruit of everything. I want the first lamb, first male lamb that drops. I want that. I want you to bring that. So they took it serious. They said, okay, well, we're going to have to stay up all night. When those babies start coming, those lambs start coming, we're going to have to catch one so it doesn't get dirty. And they would wait and they'd watch and they'd say, that's the one right there. And they'd take it and they'd wrap it in a cloth to keep it clean. And then they would set it aside and they'd put it in a manger so it doesn't get mixed up with all the other ones, and said, that's the first male that's been born. That's the first fruits. We're going to give that to God. That belongs to him. Powerful image, isn't it? And they did that with everything. They were just so strict with it. It got twisted, and it became this legalistic, it changed from a beautiful thing to a legalistic thing, that kind of an arm-twisting thing, like you will do it. And I think people, after a while, it's like anything religious, they hated it. It got so far away from the original intention. Can you imagine a dad coming home from the market? And he's got this big sack of seeds, beans, over his shoulder, and he hikes in and he drops it on the table, and he looks at the kids, and they know the drill. As soon as they see it, they have to cut that sack open and they have to count every bean. And it can't be less than 10%, because they're afraid that anvils might fall out of the sky on their heads, or their donkey might break down, or they might get sick, or lightning will strike near the house, or something bad will happen if they don't do it. And that got into the hearts of the kids. And if that's in your heart, if that's the reason you're tithing, that something bad, some curse will come upon you, something bad will happen to you, it's wrong. And after a while, the kids hated it. I mean, counting beans every week, and not only did the dad say, it can't be less than 10%, it's got to be exactly 10%. But I don't want to give him one bean more, because he's just a mean old guy who might hurt me or make us sick if we don't give him 10%. And it became something it was never intended to become. And to get that out of the heart of the people in our churches, we have to get that legalism, that negativity. It's got to get out of it. We've got to get back to Genesis, to when tithing was pure. Our people should love to tithe. It should come out of a want to. God shouldn't have to squeeze our. In fact, if you're tithing 5301 or 5103 on the check, you should be able to round that off. It should be different. It should be really what's in our heart. 10% was what God required. And so we know, there's tithing isn't mentioned in the New Testament as a law for us in the church, but we know that the law was to show us what pleased God, then we know we just don't do less than that. But that's what pleased God. Now, here's what's cool about it. In Deuteronomy, chapter 14, verse 23, it says, here's one of the reasons I want you to tithe. It will create in you a fear of the Lord. Now, the fear of the Lord is an awareness that God's looking and that God's listening. It's being aware that everything I do, God sees me. God knows. That fear of the Lord is missing in so many people's lives. There's such a little, many people have no fear of God. And the way we gossip, the way we treat each other just shows we're not conscious that God is looking. So he says, one of the reasons I wanted you to tithe is to create a fear of God. I learned, it's an interesting study, if you fear God so that you're giving 10% of your income, your first fruits, and you're giving that to God, and you know he's looking, and he's the only one that knows whether it's 10% or 9% or 8%. He's the only one. I mean, no one else is going to know. That creates a fear of God. That fear of God then transfers into what you look at online, what movies you watch, what you say in private, because you're conscious God's looking. And it actually creates a fear of God, which is profound. In the New Testament, it doesn't talk about tithing as a have to. It's not given. It talks about giving and setting aside as God has prospered you on the first day of the week. That sounds like tithing. Jesus is standing near the offering box in the temple. The offering box would be as big as this wall. I've seen first century offering boxes in Turkey, and they're huge, and they have a slot. And in India, they have the same thing, and people will walk up and pour their rice. They'll tithe their rice, and they'll pour it into the slot. Jesus tells this story, or one of the gospel writers tells the story of Jesus watching the offering box, which is really an amazing thing. That's the fear of the Lord. Jesus is watching. And he watches the rich guys waddle up to the slot, and they get a basket, and they pour all their coins into that slot, and Jesus is watching, and they're giving out of their abundance. Then he watches this little old lady, and she comes up, and she reaches inside of her clothing, brings out a little leather purse, and opens it up, and takes out 2 of the smallest coins available. And maybe she prayed, maybe she took her time, maybe she did Deuteronomy 26, but Jesus watched her put those 2 coins in that offering box. And he calls the guys together. Guys, come here. Did you see this? They gave out of their abundance. She gave everything she had. I mean, it so moved Jesus, he told that story and wanted his disciples to see it because it was precious in his sight. I think Jesus is still watching our offering boxes. I think he still sees our motives, sees our heart, sees what moves us. So Jesus later on, he's teaching about giving. He says, just don't give to be seen by anybody. Give for your Father's eyes only. That's called the fear of God. So he says, now make sure there's pleasure. There's something that says, Lord, you know we're hurting right now. You know we don't have enough. But I want to honor you in this. I want to honor you. In Proverbs chapter 3, it says, honor the Lord with the first fruits of all your increase, that your barns may be full, your vats may be overflowing. It's honor. It really has to do with honor. And so that has to be the motive. And so he says, honor the Lord. And so you say, Lord, I'm writing this check, or I'm putting this money in this offering plate, and I don't have hardly enough. I remember one time I went to a camp meeting and I had no money. And someone gave me $20. And that was a lot of money, $20. Now I could be at the camp meeting, I could get in on the offerings. And I met a guy the first day who didn't have anything. And I went back and forth. And I said, Lord, I'm going to give him the $20. See, I don't think in all these years I've walked with the Lord that he's ever told me to give. I honestly can't tell you any time he's ever told me to give. If he tells me to give, then it's a commandment and I have to do it. I think he wants me to want to give. And so that's the tug of war in me is between my flesh and my spirit. My flesh, he's a cheapskate. He's a getter. He wants to get. My spirit loves to give. I've loved to give since I first met the Lord. So I gave this guy $20. Now I have nothing. And it occurs to me, just as it's time to leave camp, I don't have enough gas to get home. And the pastor, I lived next door to the pastor, he come up to me and says, I'm going to stay for a board meeting. Would you take my wife and child home? He had a newborn child. Would you drive them home? It'd be convenient for him. I said yes. Then all of a sudden I began to tremble. I don't have gas. And then this whole thought of me running out of gas along the highway, and I got this baby in the car, and it's hot, summer heat. Pastor's wife in the car. I mean, I began to tremble. And so I had to get that under control. And I went back to the Lord, and I said, now, Lord, I need money to get home. I need gas money. And I'm asking you to give me gas money. And I waited around. Camp meeting was coming to a close. Nobody came. Nobody gave me any money. I got in the car by faith, fired it up by faith, sitting there thinking of gas and praying under my breath, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you that you know. And I began driving it was like a long grass driveway. I began driving away from camp meeting. And just as I started leaving the campgrounds, in my rearview mirror, I saw this guy running after me. And he got closer and I stopped. And he came up to the window and he says, here. And he threw $20 in the window. And now I could buy gas to get home. I had experiences like that so many times that built my faith and built an awareness of God's goodness in my life. And I wish that for everybody. This whole thing of giving is one of the greatest adventures that I've been on. I wish that whole negativity about tithing would go away. It doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon, but you're young. I would say let it get in your heart. Starts with a promise. Came through Abraham. It was given to Abraham. Came through Jesus to us. Just let that work in you. I remember saying that my church helped pay for my first mission trip. But after that, I said, Lord, I want to pay for all my mission trips. I want to pay for all these trips. We had no money. And I said, I want to believe you. I want the witness. I want the confirmation that you're in this thing. I'm disposed to go. I just want to go. The only way I'm going to know that I'm not supposed to go is if you don't give me the money. And so I made a deal with the Lord. I would raise my hand before the Lord. I just want to pay for. So to this day, I just pay for all my own mission trips. And I got among some college students, and they got touched by the Lord in a powerful way. And they came to me after the meeting and they said, now that we've done this, can we do something else? Is there something else we can do? I said, what would you like to do? And they said, well, we've got a summer or a winter break from college coming up. We want to use that for the Lord. What can we do with that? And I said, well, go to Brooklyn. Brooklyn was the worst place I knew. We had a church down there. They could sleep on the floor of the church. It was safe. And go out, work with the homeless and work with people. I would just ride the subways and meet people and talk with people and pray for people. I just had a ball with it. And I said, let's just get on the subway and just start praying under your breath for people. And they'll come to you. The Lord will make sure that there's that connection that built in the spirit. I don't know how many times that's happened. Powerful stories. So I coached them on that. And they said, we'll do it. So I arranged for them to go to Brooklyn. And they went to that church. And after the first week, I thought I should go down and check on them, see how they're doing. And so I drove down and parked in front of the church, and I'm walking down the street. They're coming toward me, and they're radiant. And they're up to their ankles in their sneakers and slush, and they're happy as can be. And they said, we've been having a ball. The Lord's been so good. We've seen so many. I said, come on, let's go up to the church. We'll sit down. You can tell me the stories and debrief. And so they're just telling me, they're talking over each other, just telling me one miracle after another, one story after another. And when they're finished, one of them said, can we go somewhere else? I said, yeah. Like overseas? I said, yeah. Like India? I said, yeah. And one of them said, you go everywhere. And we don't know how you get the money to do that. Like, where do you get the money to go, to fly? Because we don't have any money. I said, well, my dad is incredibly wealthy. And I go in and I tell him what I'm thinking, what I'm longing for. And so far, he's just cut me a check for everything. And they said, would you ask him for us? And I said, I could, or you can ask him yourself. And then all of a sudden it occurred to him, see, Abraham's God is my dad. Amen. I mean, that changes everything. Abraham's God is my dad, and he's crazy about me. Moses' God is my dad. I heard a guy say one time, he was on a beach in Tel Aviv, and it was a Sabbath, and kids are running, and people are fishing, and picnicking, and he heard this kid calling for his father in Aramaic. And he said, Abba, Abba. And he said, for the first time, he heard what it sounds like someone to say, Daddy, Daddy. And when Jesus was on the cross, he was saying, Abba, Abba. I think becoming aware that he really is our dad, and no one loves you more. No one cares more. No one wants you to grow and experience, and the hardships is the way to do that, experience more of his grace than he's your dad. Powerful thing. Here's what the Lord didn't want, and I'm going to stop with this. Here's what the Lord didn't want. He didn't want a few rich people to run the show and be the ones who supported the temple or tabernacle. If you've ever been to a church where there's 2 or 3 rich people who pay for everything, it's the worst church to be part of. I mean, head for the hills, get out of there. It's their church. They'll tell you. And you can't preach whatever you want to preach, or you can't have a move of the Spirit because they won't let it. And they make it known, I'm paying for this. And it's an awful condition. So the Lord said, I don't want to ever have a few rich people who throw the weight around and who decide everything. So the way to get rid of them, prevent that from ever happening, is to have everyone give 10%. It's the best way. So we've seen some churches where a few rich people die and then they leave what they call an endowment. And it usually is the death knell of that church. It never really grows after that. It'll shrink. And so an endowment, I mean, if there was a way to make that just so it pays for the building or something, I don't know, but there has to be a way. But it's not the way God created. He created this tithe system. If you don't like it, you have to take it up with God. So I go to Europe quite a bit, and I met people over there who, in Germany and different places, excuse me, the government pays for everything. So the pastor's salary comes from the government. His retirement comes from the government. The church's upkeep is all from the government. There's no tithe. And they don't believe in, I mean, there's heavy taxes, but they don't believe in They don't want the priests or the pastors to exploit people. So to prevent that, they pay for everything. Those churches never grow. They're dead as can be. And I've met people who wish they had the life that we have, but they can't say goodbye to that pension. And I've talked to them, and they get the same amount of money whether they preach good or not. They get the same amount of money whether the church grows or not. They don't have to visit people because they can stay home and watch TV because they get the same amount of money no matter what. It's a death knell of that church. And the ones who have new life, they hate it. And there's lots of churches in America that don't give. So they rely on yard sales and to pay for the general expenses of the church. And they keep the pastor, they keep him under control by limiting how much he'll get. I just think there's another way. And I think the pastor needs to be the first person to tithe and the first person to really live that life of giving. I made up my mind a long time ago. I'll never take up appeal for finances for something unless I'm the first person to give. You know, I'll give in private. I'll give before the Lord. Whether we buy a tent, I mean, different times we've bought a couple tents where I'll say, if every family in here would just give $500, starting with me, we could pay for this tent. And we would buy tents. One tent we bought in 3 minutes.
Wow.
We've bought 2 of them. But you don't have to convince people you're a giver. They know, they can tell. I can tell who gives in our church. I never see the books, but I know who's committed. I know who the givers are, in a sense. In fact, someone will give me a hard time, or they'll start leaving the church, or their attendance will drop off. And I don't look at the books, but I'll say to the treasurer, has their giving changed? Yeah, about 3 months ago, their giving changed. They stopped giving. Well, someone said the last thing to join the church is our wallet. The first thing to leave the church is our wallet. And there's a truth to that. There's something to that. If we don't like the pastor, don't like the church, we stop giving. It happens everywhere. It's human nature. But if we're grateful, we're pleased with what's going on, we want to contribute, want to give. Let me just say this about churches. Nobody owns this building. I mean, there's a denomination that owns it, but in a sense, this is the light bill, the water bill, sound equipment, chairs, all of that, AC, the heat in the wintertime. The people who pay for that, it comes out of the tithes of the church. So we just want people to, it's not my bills, it's not the pastor's bills, it's our bills. Yeah. So everyone should contribute to that. And we would run into summertime when the giving would drop way off. And so I just had a heart-to-heart fatherly talk with the congregation. I said, I think what's happening is you're tithing, but when you leave for the vacation and you're gone for part of the summer, you just stop tithing because you're not in church. Well, your bills are ongoing, whether you're here or not. I said, you might be going to another church on your vacation. I hope you do. But you're probably leaving your tithe there, but this is where your bills are. And why don't you leave them with a generous offering, but make sure your bills are paid back home. When they saw it that way, that it's shared, and we're all in this together, and it's all part of our commitment, that big dip that we saw every summer was gone. People just weren't aware of how we do it. But tithing is sane. It's the fairest, most beautiful way to give. It was God's idea. People say, well, should I tithe on the gross or the net, or should I tithe on a windfall if I get, a tax return? Should I tithe on that? Talk to Jesus about all those things. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I don't want to put rules on it. We live so free from all those rules that there's no going back. I just know that we always have enough for everything we need, and we're generous, we give, we sow. It's the best way to live, I'll tell you. Just heard of an old couple in their 90s giving to a televangelist and giving away all their money to a televangelist. That televangelist doesn't have the wherewithal, trust in God, to say, you guys shouldn't do this. And the kids are upset. But he's so given to that he can't say no, he can't turn it off. But that's what gives this whole thing a bad name, bad reproach. I think of as churches, we raised our hands, said, no, we're going to believe God. We're going to rest in His promises. We're not going to get blessed by. We don't want our names in the paper for the shadiness, the stuff that goes on. What a way to live. Amen?